more than strength. So welcome to More Than Strength. I'm Dan Flanick, and today I'm joined by someone extremely interesting. His name is Mike Erwin, and Mike is the founder, is that right? The founder of Team Red, White, and Blue.
Yep.
I'd like you to give just a quick summary of what Team Red, White, and Blue is.
Yeah, absolutely. So Team Red, White, and Blue, we're a national nonprofit organization with the mission to enrich veterans' lives by connecting them to their community through physical and social activity. So basically helping to provide a sense of better mental, physical, and emotional health. And then, connect them to people in the community, and then to establish, in some cases, reestablish that sense of purpose that veterans felt while they were on active duty.
So I want to dive right into the reasoning behind why you started Team Red, White, and Blue. So tell me about the process that led you to coming up with the idea of starting something like this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I graduated West Point in 2002, and then I went out to the Army. And over the next 7 years, I deployed for about 2.5 of those years. So I did Iraq once, and then I did 2 tours to Afghanistan as an intelligence officer. And after that, I was chosen to go back to West Point and teach leadership and psychology. So in the process of that, I went to graduate school at the University of Michigan, where I studied positive psychology and leadership. And while there, I was frankly going through some challenging times myself. Even though I was still on active duty, I wasn't around the soldiers, the people who I was around for the past 7, and really when you include West Point, 11 plus years of my life, day in, day out. So there was a culture shock of being, in a big college town and not having, my people around me. But then there was also, I think the challenges of like how to stay motivated to stay fit. Because, sometimes it's difficult, especially when in the military, you're used to spending, your time working out with other people almost all the time. And then if you take those people away, how do you stay motivated to stay fit? And so, really the initial idea behind Team Red, White, and Blue was, how can I help veterans and leverage running and triathlons and CrossFit and like physical fitness as a vehicle to raise awareness and to raise money to support them. So that was the initial idea. The initial idea wasn't like most entrepreneurial ventures, it wasn't what we launched with. It really was, hey, how can we help veterans, but let's leverage physical fitness to be the vehicle to raise awareness and money to do that. And of course, it all sort of changed over the next 18 months, where many parts of the country, things started popping up, and it was like, wow, this is really taken off, but not the way we thought. Turns out that a lot of veterans wanted to connect with each other and connect with other members of their community through that physical fitness. And so in many ways, physical fitness became what we did. And it's still, as an organization, in large part, what we do as the vehicle to help veterans to meet people in the community.
So you mentioned that, when you came back from your tours in Afghanistan and Iraq, you were at University of Michigan, and it was a struggle for you, I guess, kind of to assimilate back into normal culture in America. How do you feel, you talked about raising awareness too. How do you feel veterans in today's society are prioritized in the minds of other people?
Yeah. So I think that, here's what I know. I know for a fact that increasingly every month, especially over the past 10 years, but especially in the past couple of years, there are more things coming at people, about how to spend their time, about how to spend their money, about how to spend their energy than ever before. Whether you're talking, think about it. 15 years ago, you wanted a movie, you had to go to Blockbuster and rent it, put it in the VCR, rewind it when it was all done, bring it. It was a big to do.
What's a VCR?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I might be dating myself. I'm 36 years old. So, and of course now you got Netflix and even awesome things like podcasts, right? There's a ton of podcasts out there that you can listen to. And like, there's just not enough hours in a day, for me to listen, to the podcast, to read the books that I want to read, to do as much as I want to do. And and so that's all to say that, like, I think that when you look at, supporting military veterans and help, especially with the transition into civilian life, there's a lot of veterans organizations that do this. There's a lot of people out there who care about this. I think ultimately the challenge becomes, look, there's other challenges there too. Education and poverty and, all the various diseases. And so there's a lot of things competing for people's attention and time. And so, really, I think that for most people, I think who've served, like, they would tell you that, hey, veterans are getting a fair amount of emphasis and focus, whether you're talking nationally, at the federal government level in the VA, which, is making steps to reform and to recreate their culture, but also just in general, I think, from an organization, from philanthropy and from business standpoint, veterans, I think, have got, a fair amount of people out there who are aware that some veterans struggle and some veterans have real challenges, to include, post-traumatic stress disorder and, and struggle in the relationships and to keep a job. But you've also got a lot of veterans who are doing good. And then you got a lot of veterans actually who are doing really great. They're out there doing new and amazing things every day, and they're building businesses and they're creating nonprofits and they're getting into government and they're coaching kids in sports leagues and they're getting involved in their churches and they're doing all these things. And so, really in many ways, veterans represent like that slice of American society that you run the gamut of people who struggle and are having a hard time and people who are doing, very well.
How do you think, well, how was it for you when you came back? I mean, it seems, you described how you started up Team Red, White, and Blue not long after you were back and going for your master's, but what were some things that maybe you struggled with in terms of just assimilating back into society? Like, did you have anything that was something like hurdles you had to jump over? And
so I think that, each person is different. And so their hurdles and their challenges are probably somewhat different, although there's certainly some common threads. I mean, for me, one of them, no doubt about it, was the people. Again, not being around soldiers after the previous 11 plus years, day in, day out, being around soldiers, that was challenging. That was replaced by people, who were pursuing their PhDs. So their life experiences and their worldview was very different than mine. Certainly at the time, back in 2009, Iraq and Afghanistan was still, it was like in the news all the time. And so a lot of people had opinions about what we were doing over there that I think were probably not fully formed. And so here I come, somebody who, had actually been there and could talk, and say, look, we're over there trying to mostly do really good things. Like, I mean, of course, everything we're trying to do is good, but we're spending the majority of our effort trying to build wells and schools and roads and clinics and get dental care and get their animals vaccinated. And that was the majority of what we were trying to do in Iraq and Afghanistan. And, to hear that from someone who had been over there, I think was eye-opening. So to me, that was the number one challenge, was the, just the cultural and the life experience differences that I had with people. But then also just the routine, so after all that time in the military, like the routine of, hey, you got to get up early, get in, you got to get into the base, Fort Hood, Fort Bragg, that sense of purpose that you had every day with putting on the military uniform, knowing that you looked in the mirror and you saw a soldier staring you back in the mirror, and for good or for bad, like going to grad school, I'm now dressed in jeans and t-shirts, and it's just a different sense of self-identity that you see looking back at you in the mirror than you did when you were in the military. And so, all those challenges that came together at the same time, coupled with it, my wife and I, she got pregnant like right when I got back. So we were starting to, expect our first kid. And I was in a new state. I never lived in Michigan. I only visited there a few times. So all those things coming together meant basically a lot of change and a lot of new things in my life, to include a lot of new people in my life. So all that came together, was challenging, for me to be able to make sense of it all and figure out, how I wanted to spend my time and how I wanted to have an impact.
So when you started up Team Red, White, and Blue, or like you said, the initial idea using physical activity as a means to connect with other people, did that help you? Because I was like hearing like the founder of something, like how they actually use their own, I guess, product, if you will, but their own design. So was that something that helped you?
Yeah, absolutely. So if, I'm sure you've read or know about Jim Collins, in Good to Great and Built to Last, and a lot of those. One of his first books actually is called Beyond Entrepreneurship, and in it he talks about this idea of muddy, wet feet, having wet feet. So sometimes as an entrepreneur, you start something because you see a challenge or you see an opportunity, and you say, "Hey, I've got a plan to address that," and then you do it. That's good, he says, but usually what's better is when you realize and you've got wet feet. So you're out there, you walk in the woods, you've got wet feet, and now you want to solve your own problem. And in the process of solving your own problem, you actually help other people to solve their problems too. And to me, like, Team Red, White, and Blue very much is that, part of that example of, I had wet feet. I certainly, there were other veterans organizations that I, tried to connect with, but they didn't use social media as much, and there was a generational, divide, and so it just didn't resonate with me as much. And of course, at the time I was a big ultra runner and doing lots of marathons and ultra marathons and stuff like that. And I looked around and realized there was no like veterans based organization, that leveraged and harnessed the power of physical activity. So, the answer to your question is, I had wet feet, and in a ways I started to, build boots that would keep my feet dry. And, obviously did so with the help of a ton of people, but I was the one who took the first crack at building the first prototype of those boots.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to where you're coming from with having wet feet. That's the same reason started this whole podcast. Like we talked about before we even started it, was just, there's so much superficial content that's out there. And honestly, for me, I think it was actually causing me to have some body image issues, with, this is how you're supposed to look. This is how you're supposed to eat. This is how you're supposed to do everything, rather than, so I wanted something like, well, what if there was something out there that just kind of talked about the things that transcend those superficialities, and, or something that you can resonate with on a deeper level than just, I want to lift 10 more pounds, or I want to have a 6-pack this summer when I go to the beach. So I completely get what you're saying. I'd really like to dive into more of a hot topic that I'd just like to hear your opinion on. I don't want to get too political with anything. I just really like to hear someone with your voice in the veteran community give a little bit of perspective on this. And so basically, as you are well aware, there's just a lot of different issues going on today. And the one I'm referring to right now is athletes not standing for the American flag. And I'm just curious, from your point of view as a veteran, like, how do you see that as a slap in the face to veterans, or do you see that as something that's acceptable because you and people like you fought to allow people to have that choice?
Yeah, so this is obviously a contested issue. Certainly, people are very emotional about it. I think, as they should, on both sides. I made a post on Facebook, when the issue with Colin Kaepernick first arose, and the big thing I said was initially, and I sort of have the same opinion today as I did back then. I think number one, it is a free country, right? So like that is the facts of the matter. Freedom of speech is protected, so long as you're not like putting people at risk, and he's not. So I think sort of like by the law, obviously, it's he has the ability to do that, and other people have the ability to do that too. But then I said, the flip side to the coin of free speech, is that there are consequences with your speech. And I think that, when you look at the consequences, certainly, some people, have embraced his message and have really said that, this is a powerful act of, defiance and making a statement and helping to drive a national dialogue. And a lot of people, I think are literally tuning out from the NFL, and are, really, just dismayed by that yet another arena in America life has become divisive. So my take on it personally is that, as someone who's deployed 3 times and who's lost friends and lost colleagues, I know what the flag means to me. I know what it means to people that I've served with, and ultimately, when you look at character, character it's what you think, it's what you feel, and it's what you do, right? So your character is not just your actions. And so to make people stand for the national anthem if they don't believe that America is living up to its values and what it says that it should and is trying to do, then in one way, like, then what good do you want someone to stand just like to kind of go along with it, and so I hope that in general that the other people decide to stand, and recognize not just the amount of sacrifice some people paying with their life, but some people playing with their mental health or with their limbs or whatever part of their health to defend that flag or to serve under that flag, that they realize the amount of sacrifice. And I think he and others have sat down with veterans and understand where they come from. My take on it, though, since the beginning has been like this: it's just not the most effective platform to actually bring people together to talk. It certainly has raised a ton of awareness, around the issues that he and others have. And look, there are some issues to be worked out. I'm the son of 2 police officers, and I believe police officers are a hugely important part of the fabric of our country. But there certainly are, not every police officer is perfect. Not every soldier is perfect. There's going to be people who are ill-trained or, have, some biases, in the ranks. And that's life. And I think it's a worthy discussion to have. But ultimately, the long way to getting to your question is, I don't think it's the most effective way to approach this, because it's I think in many cases further dividing people. Even though in some pockets people are coming together because of this, at the end of the day, it's primarily driven people further into their corners about how they feel about some of the issues in the country. And I feel that really what we need is not just a few dialogues here and there between people of color, African Americans from the community, or athletes and police forces. We need a lot more people to have this dialogue, about how we can make things better moving forward. And I think we're further from those conversations happening in most pockets of America today because of this than we were before this all began. So, it's a long-winded answer. So, I mean, it's not a political answer. I mean, I see all sides of it. I disagree with the approach. It's legal and it's fine and protected by the First Amendment. But I don't think that it's necessarily meeting the achieved end state, other than drawing a lot of attention to some of these issues. But drawing attention doesn't solve them. It's the actual conversations and the meetings and the dialogue. And if we're not actually getting closer to having more of those discussions, then I'm not sure that it's having the intended effect.
So you definitely thought about that a lot.
Yes, yeah. I have. Well, just because I've talked to a lot of people, and I try to be like very like not like center of the road and things, but I think that at the end of the day, most issues, very, 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 very few issues in this world are either one or the other. And I think in our country, we've kind of moved into like these camps, like cops are the best, and cops are terrible, what I mean? Like they're racist. And it's like, no, like there's, what I mean? Like there's a middle ground. Not every police officer, is fully trained right now. And certainly even the cops who have in some cases, killed people in response, like they didn't put on the uniform that day saying, I'm hoping that I can have the opportunity, to take someone's life today. I think that, there's just this middle ground we've got to as a country. And I think veterans really sort of tend to do this very well, kind of down the middle of the road and see both sides of the picture, and say, look, let's figure out how we can address these things and, bring it together to, come up with a solution.
Well, in a way, I feel as though veterans have kind of been on both sides of the picture
Yeah.
too, which is probably a reason that they are able to objectively do that.
Yep. Absolutely.
So I want to wrap it up with you, but before we do, I just like to hear, just end it on a really high positive note, going back to your positive psychology.
Yeah.
What are some of the stories that have come out of Team Red, White, and Blue? If there's any, maybe one or two that you can share that have just really lit you up inside and kind of help give you maybe motivation when it wasn't going the way you wanted to, or just continue to tell you that, yeah, this is the right thing to do. I'm going to keep doing this.
Yeah, I think that in the early days of Team Red, White, and Blue, and any entrepreneurial effort, I love this quote that I saw recently from Steve Jobs. And sort of, you have to have passion for what you're doing, because if you don't, you're not going to be able to stick with it in those first couple of years, because those first couple of years you're going to have inherently way more failures and setbacks than successes. And so, no doubt about it, for Team Red, White, and Blue, like in those early days, there was a lot of like days when I said, "What am I doing? Like, what are we doing here? Do we really need to do this?" And undoubtedly stories would trickle across Facebook or come into my inbox, or someone would send me a text message or a picture, about someone whose life had been significantly enriched and improved by their involvement in Team Red, White, and Blue. And those things are worth their weight in gold. Those positive stories, because they lift you up. They make you remember why you're doing what you're doing and why you're taking all those licks. And so one of them early on was in Ann Arbor, was this guy named Ira Crawford. And he's just an amazing guy. Got shot in the head, and survived his tour in Iraq, and didn't really get involved in Team Red, White, and Blue very much in the first year or so, first year and a half, but finally paid attention long enough they got involved. And you see he's out there now running a half marathon and doing CrossFit and doing yoga and doing all these things. And you see him post on Facebook, not because anyone's asked him to, but because he feels inspired and he wants to share that good news and that inspiration with other people. He goes on his Facebook and shares it with people. And when you see that, the unsolicited promotion of what you're doing, I mean, it speaks volumes. And we've got tons of people, who have messaged into the website and shared with us, like, hey, without Team Red, White, and Blue, I wouldn't be here. It helped me to meet people who were there for me during a really difficult time in my life. And, I certainly, may, have taken my own life, in the process of these past couple of years, that without people in Team Red, White, and Blue, I might not be here. And then, of course, you just get into the people that you see out there who, had put on 40 or 50 pounds, by not exercising over time, and then they get involved in Team Red, White, and Blue, and they forget the weight, but they now do these things that they never thought, like they're doing CrossFit. They're doing a half marathon. There's something that they never thought they could do, or that they would do. And sure enough, like, here they are, those kinds of stories are just everywhere in the organization. And, we're, 30 paid staff and over 1,800 volunteer leaders. So on both fronts, our staff is juggling so much and doing so much. And then our volunteers, they're not compensated. It's all their time. And so the inspirational aspect of what we do is huge. And I think that, not just in the first couple of years, but really no matter how long you stick around as an organization, like Zig Ziglar said, I recommend inspiration is like bathing. It's recommended daily. It's not like, oh, I'm inspired today, like that's it. No, you need to find your source of inspiration and motivation just about every day. Because that's the way the human mind works. It doesn't just constantly stay motivated and inspired because of one thing happened, 5 years ago, right? It requires that inspiration in a consistent way. So,
yeah,
that's
really cool. Like, just being able to empower people. It's amazing to watch when people feel like they're capable of things rather than incapable. So, where can where can people get more involved with Team Red, White, and Blue? Just some links or?
Yes, yeah, totally. So just team RWB for redwhiteblue.org. You can join a local chapter. We've got 198 of them at last count, all across the country, and actually a few, like one in England and one in Korea and Germany. And we have a few of them across the world. But you can get involved. Honestly, that's the best way you can get involved in Team Red, White, and Blue is by joining a chapter, getting personally and emotionally invested in people's lives in your community, meeting veterans, sharing your story with them, listening to their story, and doing so ideally through physical fitness, and then helping to build those relationships, because that right there is the power of life. We know that the number one driver of life satisfaction is the quality of your social relationships in life. And if you've got good relationships with people, they're going to be there to celebrate your successes. They're going to be there to pick you up when you get kicked in the teeth. They're going to be there to help you when you got to move, and they're going to be there, to give you a high five or pat you on the back, when you've done something that you never thought you could do. So that's great to go out there and run your PR in a marathon, or on CrossFit, or working out, or it's doing it and sharing that and celebrating that with other people that makes life, and that's really what we're all about. And we're helping, veterans to connect with a lot of people in their communities to hopefully have more of those relationships that help make their life, stronger and better. And people who want to get involved can do that. They can get involved and be a part of someone's journey.
Thank you for sharing all the information that you have in this 30 minutes. I really appreciate you coming on here. And I think that people listening out there are going to get a lot out of this. So thank you. Do you have anything else to add before we wrap up?
No, that's it. So appreciate the opportunity to share this story about Team Red, White, and Blue, and definitely look forward to hopefully seeing people say that they signed up or joined the team because they heard about it here. And otherwise, thanks again for the chance. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. That's the goal. All right.
All right.
See you next week on More Than Strength.